I'm Anya, and welcome to part 3 of my Wynonna Earp video at WonderCon. Wynonna Earp is on 10 p.m. on Fridays on the SyFy channel. If you like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this show is definitely for you. I got to interview Beau Smith, who is the creator of the comics, and producer and showrunner Emily Andras.
Oh, the beginning actually shoots back to about 1958 when I was about 4 years old, because on landscape television then there was nothing but westerns. So that's what I grew up with, that and dinosaurs. So I had a fascination with Wyatt Earp. Used to write in my notebooks in elementary that had him fighting monsters constantly. He was chasing the werewolves, he was chasing vampires. Just stuck with me, and then when I got in comic books in the business as a writer in '87, I've always wanted to try to put that in the books. But unfortunately, in 1987, westerns were on the wane, so that wasn't going to happen. And in around 1994, I decided, well, I want to make it a descendant of Wyatt Earp, and instead of hunting regular fugitives like marshals do, she is going to hunt paranormal fugitives, because there's a paranormal organized crime, and she's also going to put paranormals in the witness protection program. So that's actually, a childhood dream get to come true, and I got to do comic books, which is really the childhood dream for me. That's where it started. And then it got optioned, and we handed it off to the smart people.
The short people is what he meant to say, the short people. So yeah, I have a history of writing genre television, always with a strong female lead. So IDW was really keen to find a strong female showrunner. They came to me, and it was honestly as if they had cooked up my perfect project in a lab. It is absolutely the perfect property. It's got a demon hunting cowgirl who's a complete hot mess, and it takes place in the West. I grew up in Alberta, which is like Canada's Montana, for those of you who don't know. And it just felt so fresh and real and witty, and I honestly was just so delighted they gave me a chance to turn it into a TV series. We're really proud of it. I say it's like Buffy meets Justified, and then I also pitch it as Buffy meets Frozen, because there's a really complicated sister relationship in it, which feels really fresh, but maybe with more exploding heads, and Michael Eklund, who plays our bad guy, who's amazing. So it's really fun. It's got a Rodriguez vibe. It's 10 p.m. on SyFy. Lots of gore, real strong female lead, but she is a real person, She really has done some bad stuff in her life. Not living up to the Earp name, I would say, but now she's sort of being forced to become a hero, and I think that journey to watch is really fun.
How close is the TV show to the comics?
All the good stuff.
Yeah.
all the best
all the bad
stuff.
things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, this character is so incredible that Beau created, and I hope I've done it justice. It really is someone who is a descendant of Wyatt Earp, this kind of strong, take no prisoners, wit, who works for the Black Badge Division, which is like a covert branch of the government that hunts, monsters and vampires and demons in the show. That was founded by Theodore Roosevelt. And, TV and comics are really different mediums. Like I was joking with Beau the other day, there's a part in the original Wynonna Earp where Wynonna's on a jet plane fighting gremlins as they transport to and from the ground. And I was like, you know what, we can't quite afford that. We have one gremlin, he's got to work the camera. So we're just going to, dial it back a little bit. And, we really wanted to bring Wynonna Earp to a wider audience. So, we dug back down into the Wyatt Earp myth. We gave her some sisters, as I've talked about. We brought Doc Holliday into the fold in a very interesting way. You'll get to find that. I gave her a new boss, and she's a little bit younger. It's almost like an origin story. She's a little bit less formed, I would say, than she is in the original comic. Is that fair?
That's exactly, because I always written Wynonna Earp at 35 to 40, in her prime and in control. She actually Agent Dawes, she's in his position at that point, and this is it's great. You take an onion, it's got layers, and you pull them off. Well, this is reverse. I've given them that little bit, and they've added all these other layers to it.
Sexy layers.
And in comic books, yes, you're limited to 18, 20 pages a book. Well, with an hour-long show, they're able to go into the depth, and really, in a matter of, say, 2 episodes, Emily has been able to show what has taken me 20 years to show with Wynonna Earp. So it's an incredible creative freedom that she has brought to the show, and it's cultivated. I mean, it's going to do nothing but make me look smart. So I'm happy. I'm real happy.
You know, I think there's really something that really drew me to the show is the idea of legends, right? Like we all have our ideas of like Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and like, you know, but you think, and what's it like to be descended from someone with the most famous last name ever? What if you're not really a good person, but you're an Earp? That's kind of interesting. That's a big legacy. And Doc Holliday, yes, he is legendary as, you know, the greatest gunslinger that ever lived, the fastest, but he was also just a man. And, you know, when you really dig down and read about him, he was kind of a con man. Like, you know, he was a mess. Like, you know, he was a real mess. He had tuberculosis since a really young age and just lived a really full life, like the occasional lady friend in the brothel. So, you know, I was just really interested with the idea of bringing someone back who could be sort of an ally to Wynonna, but also kind of subverting those hero myths, you know? So now that you've seen the first show, spoiler alert, I think our Doc, is very sexy and very young and very fresh for reasons that will be explained, but he's also kind of morally gray. Like, I think Doc Holliday was really a guy who was a survivor and took care of Doc Holliday. You can correct me on this, but I believe Doc met Wyatt in real life because Wyatt got into trouble at a poker game and Doc stabbed someone who was going to shoot Wyatt in the back. Stabbing someone in the back is not the most heroic move, but Doc Holliday was a survivor through and through. And, you know, the beauty of a Western, I think, is really being able to explore those shades of gray, right? It's really hard if you give someone like our Wynonna Earp, who's kind of a messed up girl, a badge and say, well, now you're the good guy. Well, you know, does the badge make her a good guy? Not necessarily. So now she's got to decide, well, who's good, who's bad, who's demonic? Are all demons really demonic? You know, they're all kind of part of the same parcel. So we wanted to make it feel fresh and new and subvert some of the stuff you know about Doc Holliday. You'll get to meet him, but I also just want to say, you know, that's a role that has such a kind of asterisk next to it. When people read they've got to try out for Doc Holliday, there's certain expectations. Obviously, I'm your Huckleberry. Val Kilmer is like pretty iconic. When we met Tim, he did an absolutely extraordinary audition. I've known him for a long time. He really blew my mind. But we flew him to LA for a screen test, and he was on the plane with Dennis Quaid, who was Doc Holliday. He was like, I don't know if this is, and he was like, I was like, did you go talk to him? He was like, hell no. I didn't know if it was like a good luck sign or a bad luck sign. But he really makes it his own, and I hope that if you love Doc Holliday, you will love this Doc Holliday. I think he's absolutely fabulous. So. Well, when you have a show called Wynonna Earp, it's a fairly critical role. It's fairly important. We saw 300 actresses easily across Canada where we were filming, from LA, some from Britain. And you know, there's something really interesting. I worked a lot in genre, as I talked about, with strong female protagonists. But the truth is, there's no real model for being a female hero. And unfortunately, what you tend to see is like a lot of really strong young actresses don't have the chance to do a lot of action or stunts or drama. So you see a lot of what I call like young actresses doing Bruce Willis or doing Clint Eastwood, right? And I'm just not as interested in characters like that versus I still want them to be a person. I want them to be three-dimensional and vulnerable and funny and messed up and crazy. So like I said, we saw 300 actresses. We were vetting them all by Beau, for sure. And in the middle of them, this crazy girl showed up. She had blonde hair piled on top of her head. She had a real take-no-prisoners attitude. Kind of a Jack Nicholson vibe, but like great legs. And she was chewing gum, which I always talk about. And this is like the ultimate no-no in an audition. Like, you just don't want to be eating food, right? It's just not that cool. But she was so funny and off the cuff, but also she felt sexy crazy. I was like, I honestly don't know what this girl is going to do in the audition. So I knew right away she was our Wynonna, and we went through a lot of people, but she is Wynonna through and through. She's so funny and so vulnerable and so warm. I really hope you'll want to watch her kick some ass, but also want to hang out with her afterwards with some whiskey. So I couldn't be prouder of her. She really deserves it. And really, the legacy of the comic is a certain wit, right? Like, Wynonna is just so funny, so larger than life. She's got great catchphrases and stuff like that. So I did feel like I needed to find someone who could carry those qualities. And you know, it's so hard for beautiful women to be funny. No, it's not. But you're really looking for a full package, right? It really felt like karma. Like, I feel like she is such an extraordinary person that she has really influenced the character, I think, as well, you know, and that's what you find. If you're any good at your job, hopefully as a producer, you start to see what the actors are capable of and what they bring to the table, and hopefully you start to write to those strengths, and I really think like we did, so, yeah. It's certainly possible. A lot of outlaws are going to show up. They're in a slightly different form. They're a little bit angrier, a little bit meaner, a little bit more demonic. Yeah, stay tuned. Definitely. I mean, that legend is so rich, right? Even the legend, just in a general sense of the Old West, I feel like there's so much expectations about what that means. And again, I feel like it's time to make it feel fresh and kind of revisit it and revisit those ideas about the American dream and stuff like that. But it's always possible. It's always possible. You fly us to Arizona second season, we'll do Tombstone. We'll see. Yeah, exactly. I would say one thing about the Western that is amazing is those shades of gray I already talked about. I think it's really hard to define good and evil in a place that really doesn't have any rules, right? But I think the original draw to the West was the idea of living somewhere where you could be free and kind of wild. At the same time, I feel like those ideas right now are kind of being challenged, right? The idea of freedom and being an individual and stuff like that. So there's sort of like the West is both wild and untrained and scary. At the same time, there's promise that you can be there and find your way and be who you want to be versus who you're told to be. So that stuff really appeals to me. Plus, it's just so beautiful, right? I don't think it's been represented on television in sci-fi in a way for a long time. And I can't speak highly enough about the Alberta landscape. That's what felt fresh to me. Instead of like, we see a lot of claustrophobic spaceships and stuff, which are incredible. This sort of has this terror of, endless sky and seeing something coming from a long ways off, crawling towards you, but still not being able to get across the desert away from it. I feel like that is something new to bring to genre right now that I hope will really hit, that it just feels exciting.
That was one of the things that hit me watching the dailies was, I told my wife, Beth, I said, this is going to look different than other shows on TV. And she was going, oh, you're just being biased. I said, no, the Calgary landscape is going to make this look like nothing else. And I said, that's huge. I mean, there are a couple scenes, that one with Waverly and Wynonna on the porch, and one with Wynonna walking down the road. Just simple scenes that you would think, but just look John Fordish with how much of the landscape that you're seeing in it. And Emily and everybody up there took so much advantage of it, and it's really going to make it look
It's really cinematic. We had a great crew. They worked on Fargo, and they worked on The Revenant, a little movie called The Revenant. So they were, well-versed. I was like, and now it's time for the real critical acclaim, the demon hunting cowgirl. This is the one, you guys, finally. This is the one. But they were incredible, so... So Waverly is Wynonna's younger sister. She's really the baby sister. There's a tragic event that happens when Wynonna's 12 and Waverly is 6, and that kind of sends Wynonna away. I mean away like to juvenile delinquents. She's institutionalized. She rides with some motorcycle gangs. Doesn't have the best life. Waverly, on the other hand, really stays and takes another path. She's beloved and protected in the town. But what I love about the sister relationship is Wynonna comes back in the pilot and these two have to figure it out. First of all, they're not kids anymore. They don't actually know each other that well. But in a very strange way, as it is often the case with siblings, I feel like they each want what the other one has. I mean, Waverly's sort of beloved and kind and trusting, whereas Wynonna, through the course of events over the pilot, sort of gets to be the superhero, right? In the meantime, Waverly's kind of been looking into what we call the Earp curse and trying to figure it out. So I think there's something really interesting where they love each other, but they don't know each other that well or trust each other. At the same time, as I've said, they really kind of would love to be each other and have what the other has. So I feel like that's a really honest relationship, but also really fun. But Waverly's got some tricks up her sleeve. She's got a lot of secrets, and I think she's got her own superpower she just doesn't know about yet.
So that's all for now. Follow The Tweeks on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Periscope, Facebook, Periscope, all that good stuff. And watch us every Thursday on ComicMix.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube.